Sorry, everybody on the phone, I forgot to unmute you, but I am recording this, so if you want to hear my opening remarks, be sure to listen to the recording later. So anyway, we'll ask all PCAs to take the PCA training that's available through Oaks ELM, and also we need new MOUs for the new biennium. However, if your agency, got a new CFO as a result of the administration transition, and you just did an MOU in the last month or so, we'll accept that for this biennium. Okay, a couple other things I wanted to touch on as we get closer to year-end close, and we'll have another of these meetings before actual year-end close. We'll talk about it more then, but this is the time of year where, you might be starting to get close to controlling board threshold for some of your Pcard merchants. So remember the Oaks BI VA10 report is out there to help you with that. ODOT was kind enough to find an issue with that report a few months ago, and so it's been updated and should be more accurate, as close to entirely accurate as we can be at this point. Also, please remember that your reconcilers must record the supplier ID for that to work. Just make this go away. Okay. Unpaid vouchers. Everybody with unpaid vouchers should be getting an email with an attached spreadsheet that shows which vouchers are out there waiting. Deb sends that out, I think, once a week or every 2 weeks. So, everybody, I want to commend you all. You're doing a fantastic job. When I started in this position 6 years ago, fiscal year end, we'd have like 500 or 600 Pcard vouchers that needed to be cleaned up, and now we're down to just a few with each of those reports that come out. So good job, keep up the great work. And one other thing is dispute transactions, and this isn't necessarily related specifically to year-end close, but I thought it was a good topic to throw in here. This year we've really been working to try to get those old disputes cleaned up. And I was just reviewing the report that Dan sent out to his agencies this morning, and I noticed some things in there that are a little bit concerning to me, because I'm seeing some dispute comments that say waiting for log or grant funds. Please keep in mind that, cardholders have 5 days to get that stuff done, and then we give the agency a few more days to, get after them to get the stuff in. But waiting on a log is not a problem. And also, the policy states it clearly. There is no authority to commit funds using the payment card. You don't actually have the funds on hand to pay that obligation. So I don't want to see, waiting on grant funds or waiting on a grants release in there for a dispute. You need to have that money available for those obligations. Any questions? Amy?
Are we on the other side of the GBEX stuff that we had? Do you know?
Well, yeah. So you guys are certainly closer to that than I am. From my perspective, yes, they've issued their credits, and they should have issued those offsetting charges at this point. But if you guys know there's issues, for those on the phone, would you mind muting? We're hearing a little background noise. But there are some, issues here and there at different agencies where they're working with GBEX to get some things cleaned up. But overall, it's my understanding that all those credits were issued and the offsetting charges should be there. Other questions? Okay, well, we'll move on to what you all came here for. This is Kathy McIntyre from OBMIT. She's the IT project manager that's heading up the group that's developing this. And I'm going to turn the presentation over to Kathy and let her show you what has been developed so far. Please keep in mind this is a product that's in development. It's by no means finished, and that'll become very evident. But we did want to bring agencies in, show you that we are actually working on this. We are making some progress, but we didn't want to get it completely done and say, here you go. So I think this is a good time to kind of show you the direction that we're heading in, and we'd really value your feedback. You know, if you see things that you think need to be different, now's the time to let us know, and we can look at, you know, tweaking it to meet your needs. Because when it's all said and done, we want you to be excited about this application and want to use it. So, all right, bear with me for a few seconds here while we get switched over. Okay. There we go.
I think you need to hide that.
Yep.
Okay, I think we're there. Can everybody hear me? Okay. I'm not used to the microphone, so I apologize if I seem strange with it. Okay, so I'm going to start in with this. This is what we've developed so far, and it is, like Jason said, it's in progress. We are, at this point, we're hoping to be done in the June timeframe, the application. However, we do have some things that are out of our control. This application, once it's done, will allow you to route a transaction through an approval process, whatever your approval process is at your agency, and then submit the transaction to OAKS, and it will update the Pcard transaction in OAKS. That's what part is out of our control. So we are working with managed services and Rackham to develop a interface to OAKS. The really neat thing is that we just learned that they are willing to put together a real-time interface for this. So this will be new, and we're really excited about it. So, you know, hopefully we can work things out and get it done in a reasonable time frame. That being said, if that piece that we don't have control over lags behind and we have this application done, it may still be a useful application on your part because you can do the whole approval process. We'll create a report that you can just print out and just key into OAKS if that happens, which is really no different than you're having to deal with today. So that being said, I'm going to go into this. Now, what we're looking at, excuse me, is my homepage, and I am an administrator, and I want to talk about administration to start with. And so the way that this will work is the administration will be handled by you, the agency. And there are really 4 different roles that exist in the application. And that would be the administrator. And then also there is the cardholder, the supervisor, and any approvers. So I'm just going to show you what this looks like. Going into the administration page, and I'm going to look at myself. Now, you'll have the ability to add users. So as users come into your agencies, you can do this process to add them. What I'm looking at right now is an existing user myself. And the thing that I really wanted to show you here, it'll take a moment to get there. I have to not start talking ahead here because there is a lag. Okay, so you can see that I've got 2 roles, and that's what I wanted to show you here, is that you can actually add multiple roles on for a user. So a user can be a card holder for your agency. It can be a supervisor, so you can have a card holder and a supervisor. They can also be an approver. They just can't approve something, a transaction that they created. So we do have those roles in the system. But I think that you'll often see these multiple roles for an approver, especially if like it's a fiscal officer who is doing approvals for multiple divisions in your agency. So then you'll be doing approvals, you'll have roles for each of those divisions. So that's just a primer or just a head start on how the user administration will work. So you can have these multiple roles. Okay. So this will start making more sense when I talk about queues. So again, we're trying to make this as flexible as we can so every agency can do their own thing. And so that's what the queues are all about. So I'm going to give an example of what a queue is it's a routing mechanism. So if I look at something like DNR, it's easy for me to equate DNR. So you have all your divisions at DNR, you have wildlife, you have forestry, you have all these other divisions, right? So you could set up a queue for each division. And that queue then can go through its own routing process. So the queue for forestry can go through, you know, all the forestry division. It might have 4 levels. You can have up to 4 levels of approval. But then the queue for wildlife, maybe it only has 3 levels of approval. So they can work independently. So however you want to set up your queues as an agency, it's just a mechanism for routing for approval. Yes?
Is the queue based on card holder?
Okay, the question is the queue based on the card holder or the division? The queue is based on the division. So a card holder can be associated with the division. What will happen is that the card holder, when they do the transaction, they'll have a choice, but it'll default to that queue that they're assigned to. And they then it routes to that queue. But again, there's flexibility there. If there's for some odd reason they're doing something for some other division or department, they can route it through that queue. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little bit about this. And again, for testing purposes, I've got some strange titles here. I've got OBM, HCM, Supervisor Queue, and OBM Designated Supervisor Queue. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what the differences between those are. So I'm going to go into this, and again, we are in progress here, and this is not the prettiest screen, and it works right now. So we are going to clean it up. But I do want to show you what this is all about. So when you set up your queues, and again, we have somebody still we can hear on the phone, so check and see if you're muted. Okay, so the queue name, you can name it whatever you want. And then the financial code fields. So what this is about is that you know, in OAKS, of course, you know that you have the default fields, fund, account, ALI, department, and program. So when it comes to those chart fields, when you get to that chart field screen, those fields will always be there. But there's all these other fields that your agency may or may not use. So you have a choice as to whether you want those fields to display on the screen or not. We don't want to waste your space by displaying all of them when you don't use them. So you can pick which fields you want to display when you get to that distribution screen. And in this example, I've got agency use in progress. So these are the available fields, and we're going to put titles here. And these are the fields that are selected. So when I get to that distribution screen in this queue, I'll have fund, account, ALI, department, program, agency use, and project. One other addition that's going to occur here to this list is speed code. Speed code isn't actually a field that is in OAKS, but it really relates to the distribution. So if you pick speed code and move it over to the right, what will happen is then that speed code field will be at the top of the distribution list, and you'll be able to enter your speed code, select it, and it'll populate the fields as it would, I think, in OAKS. So that's a little bit about the optional financial code fields. Oh, we got a typo here too. Fields available to cardholder. So we've got these grouped here, and I'll talk about these groups. I'm going to talk, well, asset tag first. When we came out and visited some of the agencies, we found that some agencies do some things that are very unique to their own agencies. So we wanted to put some flexibility in this application to allow us to, if you needed a field just for your own use that wouldn't go to Oaks, then we could actually add a field, and you could display that field for the users. An example of that would be like a tagged asset. If you wanted to just say, I want to list this transaction as a tagged asset and run a report to say, here's all the transactions that I listed as tagged assets, then you'll be able to do that. So that's just an example of this, and we can add fields as you come to us and say you need them. It'll be a very easy thing in our application to do. The next thing is I'm going to talk about the supplier ID and the supplier PO contract MB. So you can see that we've got supplier ID repeated, and the reason why we did this is that we could see that there could be instances where a user is maybe a card holder, and they don't need all that depth to be able to pick a PO or to pick a contract, but maybe they can go ahead and pick the supplier. So that's why we separated it out. So in this example, the card holder can actually add the supplier in, but they won't have to see all that contract, PO, and BE stuff. Now, the supplier PO contract MBE, for the person in this example, we've got it down on the approver. So what will happen is the supplier, once the supplier is entered, the system will go back and check and see if there are any current valid POs associated with that supplier. It'll bring that back into the application and give you a list of those current valid POs that you can select from. Once you select the PO, then it's going to go back and check to see if there are any contracts that are associated with that PO. And it'll bring that back and let you select that. Or if there's no POs associated with the supplier and there are contracts, then it'll jump right from supplier to contract and let you select those. But again, we figured that most cardholders aren't going to want to see all that. So, but maybe the supplier might be helpful. So that's the difference between those two. Then the other group would be the chart fields, and the chart fields are just your distribution fields, like all these, fund account, ALA department program. So that's how you can group things. So in this example, the cardholder is going to be able to add a supplier. So is the supervisor. And then the level 1 approver is going to be able to do chart fields, supplier, PO contract, so pretty much everything. And in this example, the asset tag is just not being used by this queue. So we can add up to 4 approval levels. You can title your approvers whatever you want to. So you could say maybe your level 1 approver is your program office and your level 2 approver is your fiscal office, something like that. But whatever you want to title them, you'll have that ability. And once you set up these queues, this will be probably the hard part. Once you set up these queues, they're in place. And also, if you have multiple divisions in your agency, you'll be able to clone these queues so that you don't have to go through the whole process of keying everything in over and over again. Now, the HCM supervisor and designated supervisors. So when we came out and talked to some of the agencies, we found that most agencies, when it comes to supervisor approval, they use the cardholder's reports to supervisor. So we've created a connection with HCM data so that we can find that supervisor. We have a feeling that that'll be something that we'll have to test very thoroughly because supervisors change and move, and we think we've got a process to handle that, but we will have to test it. But the other thing that we found is that there are a few agencies that maybe have centralized Pcard groups that, or Pcard groups that have a supervisor that is not there, reports to supervisors, handles all the approvals. So that's where we gave the ability to designate a supervisor. So, oops, I didn't need to. So I'm going to go to the designated queue and just show you the difference here. So when I get down here to designate, I have this other set of fields. So that was what happened when I selected designate supervisors. So your list of supervisors that you can designate everything in this queue to go to for approval for the at the supervisor level. It's based on whoever is a user at your agency who has that supervisor role. So that supervisor role, I showed you the user administration, and you know I had the multiple lines, and in mine I was an agency administrator and a card holder. So that that person that has one that's called supervisor would be listed here. So in our example, we had 2 people who are supervisors for OBM, and again, this is for testing purposes. So these are just OBM IT people, but here they are. So in this queue, anything that's routed through this queue, from any card holder that uses this queue, it's going to go to Alex Kale for approval. So that's what's listed there. You can put multiple here too. It can go to 2 supervisors at the same time, and whoever picks it up first approves it. So you have a lot of flexibility with how you set up things for your agency. And, you know, we expect that there'll be a lot of collaboration between us and those agencies that first decide to use this, so that we can work together to help you set everything up and test and make sure that everything works properly. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to go into, are there any questions about queue? Yes.
Just quickly, you might have mentioned this earlier, kind of covered it. Say you have a queue set up and you wanted to designate like just an alternate approver while you're out on vacation or something like that?
That's a good question. Good question. So the question again was, can I just delegate to another approver? And yes, there's an approver delegation. I'm not going to click on it because I haven't tested it yet. So I don't want to see failure here. But the way that this will work is that we'll be able to set a delegated approver for yourself, and you can set a time frame for that delegated approver. So you could say, I don't want to put an end date, so there'll always be a delegate. So they'll always get email notice and have to, you know, sift through those emails, I guess. Or you could set a time frame. Say, I want to delegate to this person. The regular approver is going to be on vacation. Now, that's supervisor. When it comes to approver, when it comes to those fiscal offices and those project offices or whoever is going to be those approvers here on the supervisor, those are grouped. So you just simply add somebody to the group and take them away.
You talked about the cardholder entering the supplier ID.
Mm-hmm. Or the supplier name. And I'll demonstrate that.
Kathy, I just want to clarify. You said who does the,
Hey, oh my gosh, how are you doing?
who does the approver delegation? Who does that delegation? Is it the Pcard administrator? Is it the actual individual?
Who does the delegation?
Yeah.
The administrator can do it, or the individual.
Okay.
Quickly clarify the no security update, other than security action. Everything has to be reset for that card holder, or how is that going to work?
Yeah, that's a good question. The supervisors, it will reset, but the card holders, it won't, as far as I know. We really didn't build anything like that in. So that would be up to you as an administrator to make sure that you disengage that card holder from this application, or move them to another primary queue or whatever you need to do.
Can you set the approvers up as distribution lists, like email distribution lists, or do they need to be individuals?
They would be individuals, but they would automatically get emails. As long as yeah, when you go and add, so let me go back to this queue administration so we have a picture here. We have a level 1 approver, and so again, we still have somebody who is not muted. So again, I want to do a picture here. So we have this person who is an approver in 2 queues. We could have other people besides Tom Wiesek who are in this HCM supervisor queue or this designated supervisor queue. You just add people in user administration to say, I want them to have access to that queue, and they'll get the emails. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you.
Kathy, there was a question on the webinar. Make sure I get it right here. How will this work for pay card holders that can purchase for more than one agency?
Okay, so that's a good question. How pay card holders for more than one agency. What we would do then is when you set them up as a card holder, you don't designate a specific queue for them to default to, and then they'll have to pick their queue every time. Okay, so we have one more question over here, and then I'd like to move on if that's all right.
And for the setup, no longer have to complete the form since we're managing.
That's a question.
I guess we will still. We have to get the card. We're doing the reconcilers and that part of it.
That should all be in the application.
Yeah, so the intent is that each agency will really only have to have you as the Pcard administrator set up as a proxy in Oaks, and that's just to handle any crazy off-the-wall stuff that might happen. But really, all of your proxies should be set up in this app. And so there'd be no need for a form. You're going to manage it right within the app.
So we just only apply for the card, same way. Turn off.
Yeah, so card application, card maintenance would be the same as it is today. However, this does provide us a platform for trying to move that stuff to a better process in the future, but that's way out.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to how the transaction works and then the approval routing. So I'm going to go into transactions, and we're still working on the order of this, but just a little bit of behind the scenes. A transaction, if you're a card holder, a transaction can occur from one of 2 instances. One, it could be, I'm going to put it right here. One, it could be coming from the bank. So we have a link up, I guess, with the data that's coming in from U.S. Bank. So all the Pcard transactions will come in, and they'll post into the cardholder's queue. Another thing that a cardholder can do by choice is to say, I don't want to wait for that U.S. Bank transaction to come in. I want to key the transaction. I'm right here at the business, and this will be mobile friendly. So I want to key the transaction, load my documents in, send it up for approval, and then let that U.S. Bank transaction merge in later. So they have that choice. So in this example here, I've got a transaction for Red Robin, again, testing. And this transaction was keyed, but it has not been merged with the bank transaction yet. And then I have this this is a bank transaction. So this just came in the bank. So for us, from a development standpoint, the key transaction presented all kinds of challenges because we needed to find a way to get that bank transaction to automatically merge in with the key transaction. And we had to figure out thresholds with that. So that'll be something that we'll have to, work on and tweak. But right now, a transaction from the bank will automatically merge with a key transaction if the amount and date are the same, and the is within about a 30% difference. So like, you look at this American Airlines, if somebody just typed in merchant name American Airlines, it would actually match up. But we have all this. So that's why we had to go with the 30%. But we'll probably, as we test, we'll tweak that. We'll work with that and try to come up with a good threshold. If it doesn't automatically merge, the key transaction will be presented separately from the merge transaction, and the cardholder will be given the option to merge it. So I'm going to show you how all that works. So I'm going to start with just the key transaction. So I'm going to key a transaction for this same thing, this easy key comp. Let's see, the date there. So date. And I'm just going to put a slightly different date because I don't want this to automatically merge. Okay, so this is what happens when you key a transaction. It's very simple. Date, amount, merchant. Select your queue. And in this case, it should have automatically defaulted, but because I'm an administrator, there's some things that are happening where it's not defaulting. So what would happen is I would come into this screen and this is what I would see. And I just key in my date, amount, merchant, and the approval queue would automatically be selected. Or I could choose the other one if I wanted to. All right, so then I'm going to next, and now I can go ahead and add my files, and I can add my supplier. So let me show you how this works. Search edit supplier, it pulls over, and I'm just going to do a search for easy key. I have no idea if, type it right here. Maybe no easy key. There we go. So right now the supplier list will come up with the first 30 that match to the entry. It's a contains match. This is the same lookup that's used by the supplier portal. So here's what I come up with. So again, just for testing purposes, I'm going to just pick something. So there it is. There's my supplier. And then I can add a document. So add files. I'm going to pick my file, open. And again, this will be something that you can do on a mobile phone. So you can then just take a picture and upload the picture. Yay. And so here's all my files, my supplier, and transaction. I can add notes. And go ahead and route the transaction for, I can approve the transaction, submit it. And what should happen here is, since it's a queue transaction, it's going to stay in my queue until it merges. So I have this easy key for 4938, and here it is right here. So what I can do then is this transaction has now gone to my supervisor for review and approve. So it's routing through the process. But then eventually the transaction comes in from the bank. So I've got this receipt from bank. So then it didn't automatically merge because my dates were different. So what will happen is then I can merge it by clicking on the key transaction, and then I have a list of all the transactions that are mergeable. So here's my bank transaction for 4938. Here's my key transaction. So this is the one I'm going to select, and I'm going to merge, and now it should be gone from my list. This was, oh no, it's not. I'm sorry. It wasn't, because now I need to approve it because the date was dramatically different. So here we go. Approve. Oh. another bug. Okay. So I should be able to approve it, and it should go on to the supervisor for approval. So now that was the keyed and merged transaction. Probably more often, you're not going to key, you're just going to wait for the transaction to come in from the bank. That's going to be the easier process for a cardholder, I would say. But again, if you want to do things right away, you can. But you might, and most times you won't have to deal with that merging, as long as you keyed in a reasonable merchant name that's going to match up. So most of the time, it'll just happen during the approval process, and you won't have to mess with it. But if you do that, there is that merge piece that you'll have to do. So a new bank transaction. So this came in from the bank, American Airlines, and I've got this amount. All I need to do is route it, and I'm going to go ahead and route it to and again, that should default. Next, pick my supplier. Fine. I have my document. I don't know why it's not doing that. We just have a new bug. Ignore the man behind the screen. Okay, so that American Airlines transaction, I approved it. It was a bank transaction. I, as a card holder, am done with it. I've added my documentation. It's moving on. Question?
My thought is, how will a card holder really know if they've chosen the correct supplier ID? Or, I mean, there's going to be multiple.
Right. So that's a good question. So the question again is, how do you know if the card holders pick the right supplier? You don't have to give them that access. So that's the answer.
Well,
yeah.
And so the subsequent approvers, they'll be able to look at it, and if they look at it and know this is not right, they'll be able to change it. So, another nice thing to give you better flexibility than what you have in Oaks today. In Oaks today, once you pick it and save it, it's stuck. This, you'll be able to change it all the way up until you submit it to Oaks. So by that time, 3 or 4 people have looked at it, and hopefully it's right.
I just have one quick question, Chris. Sorry if you mentioned this. Will the Pcard holder get like an alert if the transaction hits their queue, or are they expected to go out there every day and wait for the transaction to see if it's there?
They'll get a single, the plan is that they'll get a single alert. So they're not going to get an alert every time a transaction. They're going to get one alert with all the transactions and say, these are in your queue each day.
Oh, every day.
Well, each day that there's transactions in their queue.
Will only the cardholder be able to merge transactions, or will the approvers and Pcard administrators be able to as well?
The plan is that only the cardholder, but that's something we can talk about a little bit more if we need to modify.
My only concern is that there will be a backlog of kind of unmatched things.
Right. And that brings up another point, is that an unmerged transaction cannot be sent to Oaks. Because the bank transaction is what we're aligning with in Oaks. So if they queued a transaction that's never come in from the bank, we don't have any place to put it in Oaks. So, yeah.
This
In the system, will you be able to reject the transaction back to the user?
Yes, we call it sendback. So I'm going to talk about this process because I'm probably going to run out of time instead of demo it. But a transaction, say it goes up to the supervisor, and the supervisor looks at it and says, well, let me just show you this because that's my next part. So I'm going to log out and I'm going to log in as a supervisor. And again, this is just for testing purposes that we've opened up this. So you won't be able to log in as somebody else.
We haven't told them to be.
Oh, okay. All right. So now I've logged in as a supervisor, and you'll see that my list here is a lot smaller because I'm not an administrator, I'm a supervisor, and so I have these options. I have transactions, transaction history, and approver delegation. So I'm going to look at my transactions. And again, supervisors will get emails too when they have transactions to approve. So the only thing, the current state of all these for me as a supervisor is they're waiting for me to approve them. So here's that American Airlines transaction. So I can go in and I can look at this. And some things I can look at is the history. You can see that the cardholder set it to draft and then approved it. We are putting a timestamp on here too. I can also view my notes or the notes that are added. So I added a testing note. The supplier's not saving, by the way. I know that you saw me put the American Airlines supplier on. We are still working on that. So, but that will be saving, of course, once we go live. And then I can also view my documents. So I can look at this and say, here's my documents. And I can open this up. And I can look at the file and I can say it's a pretty picture of a beach that's coming up here. And that clearly is not anything to do with that American Airlines transaction. So I can look at this and say, hey, you know, you didn't put the right documentation here. So I can go ahead and send it back to the cardholder. And when I do that, then it'll leave my queue, it'll go back to the cardholder, and the cardholder will then, and I can put a note here, send back, and add the note. I can go ahead and do this. Wrong attachment. And send it back to the cardholder. And then it's gone from my queue as a supervisor, it's back to the cardholder, and the cardholder has to fix it and resubmit it. So that send back will work this way. When it gets up to the supervisor, they can only send it back one place, the cardholder. But say it gets up to the approver, the level 1 approver, then they have a choice. Do I send it back to the supervisor or do I send it back to the cardholder? Probably more than likely they're going to send it back to the cardholder, but they have that choice when they do a send back. So you can send back to anybody down the line. Question?
If you send back a transaction, will the supervisor will then have to reapprove it?
Yes.
Okay.
It'll have to go back through the approval process. Yes, that's correct. It'll have to go back through the approval process again. Yeah, so if it went all the way up to the 4th approver and they send it back to the cardholder, it's going to go all the way back through everybody again. But you can see that approval, and actually I'm going to show you this approval process. Question?
Is there, because we're getting rid of the law, right, we're eliminating the card law, but is there anything to help the cardholder manage? I mean,
Like reports or
because things are coming in from the bank, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Getting it. So I'm just thinking as a cardholder who has a bunch of newspapers, is there anything in this system to help them manage to go, oh yeah, I did purchase this, but it hasn't come through yet? Because some merchants take a while to get, and so you're sitting there and then you got a call. Other than that,
so you can
read something ourselves.
Right. You can key in a transaction and put it in a draft, as a cardholder can put it in a draft status, and it doesn't route. It just sits there, and that's your reminder to say, I've got this transaction in a draft status. I can go ahead and attach my documentation right away that way, but I'm still waiting for it to come in from the bank. So,
Tell reservations.
yeah. And they're also, do you want to talk about disputes too?
Yep.
Let me go through this approval process. I'm going to go back to the cardholder, and I'm going to talk about disputes. But since I'm here, I want to do this. So,
Yes, we'll try to make sure that the questions from the audience are clear.
I figured the mic would work, but if they're back too far, we probably can't hear it.
Yeah.
Okay. So this transaction is a bank transaction, and it's ready to be approved by the supervisor. Wait a minute. Oh, back to something's not captured. So as a supervisor, once I've viewed everything, I'm ready to approve it. All I have to do is hit approve, submit, done. And then it's out of my queue. It's moved on to the level 1 approver, whatever title you call the level 1 approver. And then the level 1 approver, just make sure it's gone. It's gone. I'm going to log out, and I'm going to log in as the approver.
While Kathy's navigating, there's a question, when will this go live? So the plan is to hopefully have development wrapped up toward the end of June. And then, we plan an iterative go live and really so we'll test, but then we'll do some production testing with OBM. And then, as we feel pretty good about it, then we'll start to roll on additional agencies, just one at a time at first, until we get, the bugs worked out of the thing and we're pretty happy with it. And then we'll start looking at, a bigger rollout to more agencies. Dan, there's a question back here from Kristen.
I just want to make sure, is there going to be separate training for the cardholders themselves? I know I don't have any, I'm not in the same agency as the cardholders, and as you know, Jason, I'm in a different area as them. Are they going to get training specific? Because this is a good question. They don't know how to do it. I mean, so.
Yeah, so for those on the phone, the question was, will there be separate training for cardholders? And yes, in fact, OBM training is on the webinar, listening in, becoming familiar, and they'll be developing training for all levels going forward.
Is there any thought, it looks like the supervisor would have to approve each transaction. Is there any thought to have batches? They could approve them and maybe a batch?
The question is, the way that the app appears to be set up is that, each individual transaction has to be approved by the supervisor. So the question is there any possibility that they could be approved by batch? I guess the answer at this point is, I don't know. We'll have to take that back and talk about it, look at the possibilities.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you could truly approve without, wanting to look at the documentation that's associated with it. So there could be a danger there, but yeah, we could talk about it.
Say we have another situation like TPEX again. Are cardholders, supervisors, approvers able to go back and view past transactions?
Yeah, there'll be a transaction history piece that, and it'll be searchable and sortable to, by merchant name, date, amount.
Dan, there's a couple more in the back.
It's going to require before full agency buy-in, or if we have certain locations that just aren't going to be able to handle this, are we able to keep and allow certain users use this tool and others not?
Yeah, so it'll have to be, the question is, does this have to be a full agency buy-in, or if there's a specific department or location that, doesn't want to use it, will the agency be able to do two different things? And I would say no, it's all or nothing. And, it's my dream that at some point we'll mandate the system at an enterprise level. But it should be good enough that that mandate really shouldn't mean anything. You should want to use it. And so to that end, one thing that Kathy hasn't talked about yet is that, this is being developed to be mobile friendly. So the idea is that, like for ODNR with all their field staff that are card holders, they'd be able to just go right into their phone, snap a picture of a receipt or an invoice and upload that picture into the app, do everything from the field. So, we're really looking at trying to make this something that everybody can use without issue. If you think that there would be problems, we need to know, specifics so that we can try to develop to meet all needs.
Sorry, I'm dying here.
What's the support structure?
The question is, what is the support structure? So this is an OBM IT developed system, and so, I would argue that we'll have better support than we even do today with Oaks because, OBM IT is right here in-house and can address things very quickly. But I'll let Kathy speak more to that.
Yes. Question?
Transaction and process, I'm the card holder, is the incorrect amount, or I didn't buy that?
Yeah, let me talk about that in a minute. That would be a dispute. Okay, so have to hold off on that. So I just want to finish this whole process here. And I did squeeze this together so you can kind of get an idea of how the mobile world would work. It'll squeeze. And so it's actually been developed using a mobile technology. So it should work really well. And instead of pulling out like we saw here with the search edit supplier where it pulls out the side, it'll pull down. And so yeah, it should work very nicely in a mobile environment. So this transaction went to the level 1 approver. This was the Discount Drug Mart transaction. Let me go back here. And so the level 1 approver is the final approver in this queue. So there are pieces that we are still building. The supplier, again, is not yet saving, but we're working on that. The line of distribution we're working on. So all that would have to be in there before the final approver can then actually finish and approve it. But since we don't have that built yet, I'm just going to approve it. So then they're done. So again, if you're just a middle level approver, that's all you have to do is hit approve and done, submit, and you're done. So it's an easy process. But if you're building out the transactions, putting in the lines and distribution, then that's going to take a little bit more work because it's going to be very similar to what you have to deal with in Oaks because that data is going to go into Oaks. Yes.
Is that something that they have to be able to choose as the distribution line, or is that something that's reconciled?
It's whatever level you put that on.
So we do have
you have that control.
Not to get.
Yeah. So the question was, who can we give that authority to be able to add the line of distribution data? And the answer is whatever level you choose to. So it could be in some cases, I think, like when we went out and talked to JFS, I don't know who here is JFS, but JFS uses speed codes, and so they're actually putting a lot of that stuff in up front. So this application will allow that. But in most cases, probably your cardholder doesn't have that kind of stuff, what they're doing. So all they'll do is just put the transaction in and be done.
Card holders that have multiple departments that they purchase for.
Right.
That was going to be a message for us.
So, well, the only difference there is that they'll just have to pick which department they're routing the transaction to for approval.
So would they have to have different queues, or can they have one queue and then choose, and then the different distributions will show up and they can choose?
The distribution will, as far as Well, the distribution is based on the transaction, not the queue, right? So,
Yeah, I don't know. And that's what I'm wondering, because when they,
So the question is, if you have like a central purchasing card holder and they're purchasing for various different offices, how would that card holder ensure that the transaction gets routed through the right path? So in that case, that card holder would have various queues to be able to select from. And so you'd have to name them by something that's meaningful to the card holder, but
right.
yeah, so I'm
So
more.
I've got a visual up here now.
Oh, okay.
So they have, all they do once they go into the transaction is they select the queue that they want to route it through.
Change the amount as well, or like they have, they bought, like our mailroom, they have $35 for UPS. Well, that $35 is being split up between 6 different departments. Are they able to go in and choose the department with that one amount?
It depends. I'm not sure how you do that today, but that sounds to me like it's multiple lines. Yes, they will.
They'll have one charge for UPS, but
Right.
split it out.
Split it out.
6 different departments.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're able to split that out, that has to come to us and for us to split that out.
Well, again, that'll be depending on what level of access you give them. So if you want them to split it out, then you'll have to give them that PO chart field role and assign that to the card holder, and then they'll have the ability to do that.
Just
yeah.
keep in mind that, you're going to have to select a queue or a workflow. So even though it's 5 different departments, one of those departments, ultimately, their workflow is going to actually approve it.
So this was the select queue question, and really it's the transaction. You just select which place you want to route it to. These titles are a little funny because it's just for testing, but again, I'm looking at DNR, which makes sense to me, is the wildlife, forestry. That would be your list here.
is there definitions behind these or something that's built in that we know when we, or is that something we create?
It's what you create.
So like ODM, HCM, then we would create what that routing is and bring that.
You create your own titles.
And the routing.
And the routing. Yes.
Highly custom.
We're going to make fun names.
Whatever works.
Mickey Mouse queue, the Donald Duck queue, yeah. Yes. Question in the back?
What about, is it able to handle, what if a transaction needs to hit multiple lines of a PO? Where currently we have to split the transaction to reference different lines on a PO.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint here. And this is in development. I was afraid I'd have this question. This is not going to be what it looks like. That's why I don't want to pull this up. But here's an example of, so the way that this will work is you pick your supplier, and then it's going to go out and find all the POs that are associated with that supplier that are active. And it's going to give you a list of POs. So then you can actually select multiple POs, multiple lines within a PO. Hopefully you'll never select multiple POs, but you can do it. So, or you could select a PO, pick your lines, and then when you get to that distribution, you say, well, I've only got $200 left in this PO, and this transaction's for $300. So I'm going to then set this line at this line for this PO at 200, and then the other 100 I'm going to break out and do a line that's not associated with PO. So I'm not sure I said that very well, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say here.
Well, and Krista, I know what you're asking, and unfortunately, and we've tried to find a way to address your issue, but because of commitment control and controlling board threshold calculation, we just can't allow you to change. Those chart field distributions that are set up in the PO have to be used, and so So you will have to, split and assign the lines to the specific part of the transaction that you're paying.
Will it still say it's one transaction, or is it's gonna split just like it looks in Oaks now, where we have multiple split transactions based on those different PO lines?
Yes, if a transaction has to be split, in order to apply the coding and the PO lines appropriately, then it will effectively work the same way as it does in Oaks today. It just should be a little easier in the user experience.
At what level would that be able to happen? Because my card holder isn't going to know what PO lines and stuff. Right now, it would be my reconciler that has to know and split those transactions. So that would be an approver in this level. They would be able to split it into those multiple lines and then continue forward with approving it.
So again, that's something that you'll set up when you establish those queues, and you'll assign, the authority to do that part of it when you create the queue.
Okay, I wanted to talk, there were a couple questions about dispute and holding a transaction. So if you have a transaction that you want to put in a holding pattern, I guess. So it's like in today's world, you have to, you get that report back from Oaks, right, that says the transactions are delayed, or that they haven't come through within the time frame.
Well,
and to be able to counteract that, you put them in dispute, right? So I think that the idea here is that instead of doing that in Oaks, you would be able to do that here.
correct.
And so then you wouldn't get that negative tick on a report saying that you haven't put the transaction in time. So you can hit whole transaction and you can select your dispute reason. And we're still working on this list of dispute reasons. So it's just a starting point again for testing, but we'll be able to modify and add to this list as we need to. So that's how that works. So that transaction will be reported basically as not a late transaction going to Oaks because of it.
So just to clarify, we're going to change that label from dispute reason to hold reason. Dispute would be a reason, but then, backup documentation not received or items not received, those would be different hold reasons, not necessarily a dispute. So we'd want you to use dispute in the future only in the cases where you're actually disputing the transaction. Everything else would be, tell us exactly why it's being held. And some things are exempt from, the 10-day rule, and other things aren't. And so, we'll have to work that out in that list. But it would really be a hold reason versus everything be a dispute.
So just that title is going to change from dispute to hold.
Yep.
So for anybody that had a question about dispute and holding the transaction, did that answer it?
That can happen at any level, cardholder or approver, wherever it needs.
We really just put, the question was that can that happen at any level? And we really had it happening just at the cardholder level. However, we can look at keeping that out there for everybody if we need to.
Dan Tanya's got a question.
So the cardholder
Cardholder would be able to put it in dispute?
Again, the cardholder is it's a hold reason. So the cardholder can put it on hold because they didn't receive the merchandise yet, or they look at the amount and the amount's not right. So yeah, the cardholder. Is that a concern, or?
Yeah, I think it'd be a concern with us. Yeah, we want to have that control too. And then I guess my question before you said that was going to be, are we going to have to do that in Oak along with doing it in this area, or do we do it in this area and that populates Oak?
So we don't have a plan to populate that to Oaks today. Whether you would need to do it in Oaks remains to be seen. So ideally, I'd like to be able to do all of our reporting and everything out of this system as well. So if that's the case, then yeah, there'd be no need to do anything in Oaks because we'd be evaluating timeliness of payment things from this system and not Oaks. And that's really all we use it for in Oaks today, is so that everybody knows what's going on. Hopefully, you know, we get this system to the point that we can all fully rely on it.
It would be great if, whether it's the card holder or someone else, but if you get dispute, click it, the form comes up, they type in whatever they need to type up.
So future release.
Yeah, and so of that concern about the other levels, we'll go ahead and work that in. That shouldn't be hard for us to do it all. Not too late to do that. So we'll definitely put that in so that any levels can set that.
So you mentioned reporting, and you want to be able to do your reporting from your end, but for us that are running regular aging reports and Cognos and out of BI, will this talk to BI, or will we be able to run aging reports out of here as well?
So this won't talk to BI, at least not out of the gate. But yeah, we need to have, you know, the capability for agencies to report from here.
Right, but that being said, our plans are to get some of those aging reports from BI and compare them to what's happening in here. And so, for example, if a transaction that you haven't put a transaction here on hold, and yet it's aged out and it's aging in BI, it's been there for or in Oaks, it's been there for a while, then we're gonna bring that data together and we can report it here. So the hope would be that you could eventually use this application for your reporting needs, but maybe not at first.
Becky?
I deal with coffee, and I have to provide the federal government with a report right now I get out of BI. It has payment cards and items and other non-payment card items. So if I'm going to be able to get an Excel report out of here, or is it going to be batched into Oaks and posted to the general ledger and we get a report out of Oaks?
Yeah, so once this thing is final approved in the system, then ideally it will interface over to Oaks and batch will run and build it to a voucher just like it does today. So all your true financial reporting should still happen out of Oaks, because that's where we're actually making the payment from.
Yeah, so keep in mind that this application is really replacing that whole approval process that you did in the past. But Oaks is still the source of record for the final transaction.
Yep.
Trying to think of anything else that I might have.
Barb has another question.
If the card holder, and I know we can set the level we're going to do this, does a merge or match or whatever the terminology is, after that moves forward for approvals, can it be unmatched?
Yes. So the question was, if a transaction is merged together and potentially you find out you merged it with the wrong transaction, from an administrator standpoint, they can unmerge those two. So in the system, all that is that we have two transactions. One is an active transaction, the other is just kind of there behind the scenes. Nothing ever happens with it, but we can bring it back if we need to. So we have another question.
When you talk about eventually interfacing with Oaks, will attachments interface over to Oaks, or will attachments only live in this tool?
Okay. The question is, and that's a really good question. Thanks for asking that, because that's something I should have covered. The question was that when this does interface with Oaks, will the attachments go over to Oaks? The answer is no, the attachments will not go over to Oaks. We have been in discussion with them, and they just have not given us a way to do that. So that being said, and this is more in Jason's area, that the idea is that you will not need to put those documents into Oaks, that they will live here. This would be your source for those documents, so you would not have to put them into Oaks. But that would be a policy change, and I think they're planning to do that.
Yep, and we'll do our audits from this system.
What will the retention be?
There would, at this point, there would be there's no plan for anything to drop off. We would look at that later as we look at the amount of volume in this, and then determine there what needs to drop off when.
But everything will have to live in this system for at least as long as it lives in Oaks.
So if OBM does an audit and says they need additional documentation, would you be adding it back into this tool? You wouldn't be adding it into the Oak?
Yes, the question is if OBM audits a transaction and additional documentation is required, where would the additional documentation be added? It would be added in this system for agencies that are using this system.
We have auditors that look at our documentation, so should there be another security role just called audit?
Yeah, so the question is for auditors within the agency that would need to look at transactions, we'll have to create another role for those, like a view-only role for folks in the agency that need to look at data.
How are you going to be able to tell in this system what voucher paid in Oaks? Is there a way to tie it?
The question is, the voucher that actually pays the transaction, how will you be able to see that in this system? So once batch runs and those vouchers are created, another interface will come back to this system to record that associated voucher ID in the transaction history.
Right, so you'll be able to see that voucher ID on that transaction entry in the history. And that way you'll know that it's been paid because the voucher ID is there.
Jason has a question. Is there going to be one voucher per transaction, or are we going to have one voucher for multiple transactions?
So the question is, will the vouchers be by transaction or, so the answer is vouchers will be exactly the same as they are today because that whole process is running in Oaks. So for those who don't know, by cardholder, all transactions approved for a cardholder in a given day get built to a voucher, and then all those vouchers are combined into a single agency voucher, and that's what U.S. Bank receives. Hannah?
So my last question is, if there's bad coding put into the application, does the budget error only occur in Oaks, or is there a talk back to the application of how coding was changed?
So we're still working on that. We were originally told that the budget error would occur in Oaks, but now we're hearing that there might be the possibility that it could talk back. So that's still a work in progress.
And I think that's a matter of getting that real-time integration set up. We've got a couple questions online here. So will the supervisor be able to see transactions that have not hit their queues?
Okay. The answer to that is yes and no. So in that transaction list, it would not appear there because the cardholder has not routed it yet. So the cardholder has not routed it for a reason. So therefore, they wouldn't see it. However, the transaction history piece, they could potentially see everything through there. So it just, in that regular queue, no, they don't want to, you only want to show them what they need to take action on. But that transaction history will give them the ability to get to anything.
I want to hit a couple more that are on the web here. Will we be able to give auditors access for our biannual audits? And I assume by that you mean like auditor of state auditors. The answer has to be yes. I think we may just have to figure out exactly how that happens.
So yeah, we plan to have like a monitor and read-only role. So then if an auditor comes into your agency and wants to look at everything, you just add them as a user with that monitoring role, and then they can get in and look around.
But will they be able to add users from a different agency?
Yes.
Okay.
So will they be able to add users from a different agency? Yes. They'll just, you can pick any user at the state of Ohio and assign them to your agency.
Additional questions in the room? Tanya?
That's one more, and I don't think it's gonna be an issue, but, you know, we're one of the early adopters of e-procurement, so I know you guys have been working with them, so I don't think there would be any issues that I can think of.
No, and that's a good question. So the question is around, you know, e-procurement and any interdependencies. So, you know, with e-procurement, you're creating a requisition, and that goes through an approval string that may very well be the same as you would have for the payment on the backside. So where we've left it with e-procurement is OBMIT will have the information about, you know, how that approval workflow works and what information is available. If it's possible, and that's a great big giant if that, you know, fills this room, if it's possible, we would like to be able to leverage that approval that happened on the front end of a purchase and just apply it to the transaction on the payment side. Again, it's a huge if. It would be a major win, I think, for everybody, but, you know, we'll just have to see.
The goal would be to never create any duplicate work or double work on any of this.
So the user ID for the sign-on is, are you guys using OHID? They might have to integrate with ODS, but since all apps are going down the ODS, you can just, even if this is a suggestion, I'm from Job and Family Services, we've gone through this iteration, that's why we did this app. That's why that was one thing that we missed.
Yes, so the question is, will you use your OHID for access? So the access mechanism that we currently have at ODM leverages not ODX, but just an LDAP connection to the state of Ohio identification. So the answer is, if we use that, then yes, you will be using your state of Ohio ID for login. You go in and change your state of Ohio ID in ODX because, or not your ID, your password, because your password expired. Then you're just using your new password here. Nothing, you don't have to manage any access for passwords here. I would say that eventually we do want to move this into ODX for sign-in only. Does that answer your question?
All right, any last questions before we wrap up the demo? Aaron?
Will all agencies be required to switch to this, or could you keep doing what you're currently doing?
So the question is, will all agencies be required to use this? So right out of the gate, no. But at some point, you know, it's my hope that this system is good enough that we can say it's an enterprise application and, you know, it's just what we use for payment card. We may all be retired by then, but. All right. Well, thank you, Kathy, for the demo. I hope everybody is as excited about this as I am. And if you have thoughts, concerns, questions that weren't addressed today, please send those my way. And we'll try to get that added to, you know, what we have in scope for this project. Somehow I got to figure out how to return access to myself. I might have to. Oh, stop sharing. If I can figure out how to do it. Oh, screen probably. Okay. All right, so just about done here. So the only other thing I had for today is to say I've gone ahead and scheduled this room for May 15th. So save that date, and I'll send out an invite soon. If you have topics that you'd like for us to cover in this forum, please send those my way, and we'll get those things added. And that's all I have for today. So any questions not related to or related to the demo? Sherry.
I just say thank you for taking us back. I mean,
Yeah, so the question was, thank you for taking a stab at developing this app, and absolutely. I mean, you know, I'm really excited about it, and I hope that everyone else is too. Barb?
Have the pilot agencies been determined?
Great question. Have the pilot agencies been determined? And no. And that reminds me, there are a couple things I wanted to ask. So while that topic has been broached, are there agencies that, you know, do want to be in that test stream? Okay, so keep your hands up because I got to write this down. So
Thank you.
we have ADJ, we have DPS. I can't remember.
We don't have to go full Monty or anything.
Oh, we'll have to talk about that. You guys are going to have to remind me. PUCO, right? PUCO?
I'm with, public defense.
Public Defender. See, I was almost there. Nursing, DRC, LSC, EPA, DOH. Krista, I can't see your hand. Okay, any other questions before we wrap up? Oh, there's something on the web here. Let me not forget about our friends out there. Is there a notification via email or otherwise to the approver or supervisor that transactions need to be reviewed and approved? Yes.
Yes.
Oh, and Medicaid, okay. All right, so this is very encouraging that so many are excited about this as well. So we will be in touch. And, you know, if nothing else, maybe we can use that group as we, you know, go through further development to be a sounding board. So thank you all for your attendance today. And again, if you have topics for our next forum, please send them my way. Thank you.